I don't know if I'm proud of saying that or not. I think it's my reality. I need it. There's a gentleman by the name of Barry Wellman, and apparently he's tried to have his students do a digital fast of some sort. In other words, go offline, off the grid for a week. And he said his students are having a difficult time. Why? Because all the research resources available at the school are online. And all of the major announcements that the college and university distribute all happen online. Our entire professional lives are being mediated through these digital connections. We Skype meetings. I was asked by a professor at Brandeis University to come and be a guest lecturer in her class. They're going to read my book, Hollywood Faith. That's fantastic. We'd like for you to speak to them. Next paragraph. We'd like for you to Skype in. When students would read, ask questions, and you'd be able to respond. So I was a guest lecturer via Skype at Brandeis University. We blog and we tweet. And I found, although I don't know how much I know whether this, but I tried to do the best I could to find a reliable statistic. As far as I can tell, 33% of professors tweet. And the ones that I interact with, and I'm on Twitter myself, and they talk about their work, they talk about their research, they link to other people's reports. If they have new articles that are out, you link to that. If they're at a conference, they talk about things happening at the conference. I learn through other people in 140 character pieces. Some of you may think that's terrible, it's superficial, it's unnecessary, but it's my life. Here's the thing that I think is important, is that it is not just technology. What I came to understand is that a new set of ideals are being promoted. That underneath all of what's happening digitally is actually a moral orientation. And that's what I want to talk through today. So it's not just clever innovation, but a new morality. And I'm calling it the hacker ethic. I'm not the only one to call it the hacker ethic, but that's what I'm going to isolate it as for you today. Before I talk about the hacker ethic, I want to remind you about the intense moral conversations that we've had in higher education in the late 1800s. This is a more familiar moral ethic. It's the one that we understand, and it's one that I've heard quite a bit of over the last 2 or 3 days. And so I started digging. Once I came to some conclusions, I said, if this is true, then it must be in our own institution. So I went into the archives of Davidson College to look and see how the moral conversations occurred about the nature of higher education. So we have the inaugural address of the first president of Davidson College. His name is the Reverend Robert Hall Morrison. He's a Presbyterian minister, became the first president of Davidson College. The president of the college was also the pastor of the church, the Davidson College Presbyterian Church. And Davidson College is a small liberal arts college established in 1837, a cooperative of Presbyterian churches for the training of ministers. It soon broadened from that, but in the first inaugural address in 1838, Reverend Morrison lays out his understanding of what the purpose of higher education is and the purpose of Davidson College in particular. He said, the cultivation of an enlightened conscience and a holy heart is the chief end of education. He said, while knowledge is power, it is education which determines whether this power will be exerted in the promotion of virtue or vice. Had Muhammad, Saladin, Voltaire, Hume, Byron, Napoleon, and other such scourges to our race been constrained by the truth and spirit of God to have surrendered their pride and ambition, and to have lived for the glory of their Maker and the welfare of their fellow men, what woes would have been spared from the catalog of human wretchedness. His aim was achieving a standard of character, quote unquote, especially that education would serve students as a means to liberate virtue, so as not to be enslaved, this is his terms, enslaved by their vices. Morrison was clear. He said, quote, "Knowledge which does not lead to the extermination of evil passions and the cultivation of virtuous habits will prove a curse to its possessor and an infamy to society." I really wish I was there. I think it would have been a very stirring and moving speech. I'm also confident that such speeches occurred in most of your institutions for decades, if not maybe last week. What is required to achieve such noble aims? And this is where the theme of the conference comes to the fore, because you have to have the right location. See, Davidson was deliberately built away from Charlotte and away from Salisbury, which was the larger and more significant of the two cities at the time, because the city was thought of as a place of temptation, vice, and immorality. And so the location allowed for the creation of a particular kind of place, right? Far from the places of vice. And so in the archives, the very first line of the first college catalog reads, "This college provides thorough education at a moderate expense and free from temptations to immorality." You continue reading. "The patrons of the institution desired a college in which the youthful mind might be trained under the restraints of Christianity, fully persuaded that any education is too dear when obtained at the expense of sound moral principle. The location of the college is highly advantageous in promoting good order and undivided application to study, free from the allurements and noise of a town." By 1867, in an advertisement that was distributed by the college, they made several statements. "Founded on the liberality and prayers of pious Presbyterians, the college has already done much to realize the design of its benefactors in sending out men of piety and learning, many of whom are now in the work of the ministry. The students, with very few exceptions, are members of the church. There exists among them a prevalent manly character, as well as a healthy tone of morals." I should remind you now that Joe Creech is a student at Davidson College, exemplifies these. "Situated as the college is," and here I excerpt, "the college is in so healthy a region and removed from the temptation of towns. The archives of Davidson College, and in all likelihood, the archives of your institution, affirm the finding of historian Lawrence R. Vasey, who wrote in The Emergence of the American University. Mental and moral discipline was the purpose which lay behind a fixed 4-year course of study. College disciplinarians essentially desired a controlled environment for the production of the morally and religiously upright. Even though we may say that the college has been secularized and that the concern for morals has gone out the window, I think that the history of higher education says otherwise. Julie Rubin, in a very nice and persuasive text called The Making of the Modern University, Intellectual Transformation and the Marginalization of Morality, makes a very strong case to say that even when knowledge and morality were distinguished, the humanistic disciplines were eager to take up the mantle of moral education, to allow the sciences to take care of the sciences, but the humanities would form the virtue of students. Other disciplines, including sociology, my own discipline, became much more involved in the development of good citizens and the consideration of environments and various social concerns. And so what I'm trying to point out here is that our institutions of higher education have an underlying moral orientation, and that's to be a formative retreat for the cultivation of virtuous adults. And I think that this is what informs much of our work, it informs much of our rhetoric, it informs much of the ideals. If you read much of the marketing, this is what I think is at the root. And I think that the underlying moral orientation is also part of the contention behind the fight against digital connectivity. I'll also speculate that the greater the religious orientation of a college, the greater the formative moral imperative of the institution. Which for me means that the clash of digital connectivity, I expect, would be more severe in church-related institutions than those that are not. So, back when I was enjoying all the issue of computers and understanding what's going on there and really enjoying what was going on, I have to say that I did not know, but I've come to understand that there is a nascent and overarching ethos that has fueled the development of our increasingly connected, and I mean digitally online network connected lives. And this runs counter to the underlying moral imperative that shape the discipline and the virtues of our institutions. What we want to see in our institutions, ideally, is students who focus 100% of their attention to the courses and social activities on campus. And that in our courses, students depend on our direction and our guidance, our expertise in shaping their mastery of knowledge and perspective. The hacker ethic is quite different. The hacker code, hacker ethics, hacker culture, these are all terms I'm using heuristically to describe this realm. Hackers are engaged technological players who boldly experiment their techie skills to test the limits of the new medium. Hackers aren't just people who illegally break into financial and government networks. Hackers include creative pioneers who threaten institutions by mobilizing a broad approach to social life and to a movement to transform the human condition on the basis of access and freedom. And as I looked back, I find a wonderful instance in the history of computing. There is a booklet published in 1974, a tract really, called Computer-Lib Dream Machines by Theodore H. Nelson. This particular booklet has been called the most important book in the history of new media. It's legendary. Many people know about this book and have not read it in its full. It's very difficult to obtain. It costs about $200 on Amazon, used, because it is not published. And it is something that you could sort of get it through interlibrary loan. It's 1987. It was published by Microsoft Press in a revised version, even though it goes against many of the principles that people would say Microsoft stands behind. Theodore H. Nelson, in this prescient piece of work, both exemplifies and predicts the significance and scope of online connectivity. He said boldly, "You can and must understand computers now." Remember, 1974. He said, "Computers will be embraced in every presentational medium and thoughtful medium very soon," very much like my talk right now.